talked about the tension between emulating, living a life that's a model, versus maybe advocating. You just briefly talked about that. And I have a question about emulating, living a life that's, a model. You said often it's embarrassing, or awkward, especially when you're a public figure. So what motivates you to continue doing that? And how do people respond to that, especially when you're working through things in a very public way?
Well, I just have a horror of thinking of myself as a model because I know myself. I've had the bad fortune in some ways to have a public life, but I know that the people I'm talking to in these public occasions, like this one, people don't know me. And the circumstances make them free to think that I'm better than I am. And that's false. And if I got very deeply into it, it would, I think, be damaging to me. I've never liked evangelism. I just, because of the threat to the character of the evangelist, for one thing. It involves talking down, and it involves presumption about the right to evangelize. I back up to the necessity simply of making as much sense as you can, put it out there where it needs to be, where it's asked for, really, and let it get on from there the best it can. To publish is not to ask for readers. It's to offer to accept readers if there are any volunteers. There's special ways in which people can think of themselves as teachers. That is, if they know something that other people don't know, and the other people want to hear it. This takes the idea of being a teacher out of school immediately, of course. But teachers in school know things that the students don't know. How to add and subtract, maybe. How to think about history. Those things, but they do involve a presumption, and sometimes they make people too proud of themselves. I have been under the influence of a lot of people. I've had a lot of teachers, most of them out of school, a lot of them who have had very little education. I've known them well, and I've known the limits to which they could be taken as models. So I'd like to shift the term model to example, and then I'd say that when we're dealing with examples, what we're looking for is what is truly exemplary. But we're not looking probably then at people, we're looking at their accomplishments. This is an exemplary job of work. This farm is exemplary because it gives you an example of what can be done, but limited to this place. You can't do on, this is what's wrong with industrial agriculture, you see. It tends to treat every farm as identical. That's why you got the same corn crops and bean crops being grown all over the place. You got to get the scale right. If you go to an Amish farm, you'll see how sensitively the cropping, the economic structure of farms differ one from the other because the terrain differs, fertility differs, exposure to the weather differs. So what's most exemplary is being sensitive to the local circumstances. And there is an analogy here with human relations. I don't know about women. Men begin life as pretty stupid creatures. and especially regarding women. They're egotistical. They can understand perfectly why a woman might love them. But there's a possibility that they can learn something, you see. And what they learn is that people ought to be treated individually with some sensitivity toward what makes them unique. I mean, you don't treat your wife as a typical woman, for God's sake. Sooner or later, you better get over that. So it's the same. You don't treat your farm as if it were a typical or an average or a representative farm. Finally, you leave monologue and you come to conversation with the place, with the person. You talk to other people, not with the feeling that they ought to hear what you have to say, but because of your interest in the difference between you and them. Maybe girls begin pretty stupidly too. I don't know. I didn't collect that many examples.